Hello, my name is Paul Rauschenbusch. I'm the Associate Dean of Religious Life and of the Chapel at Princeton University. And welcome to the Inner Core. This is a monthly program that we interview people who have something to say about religion or ethics or spirituality or culture. And today we have a very special program for you. I'm really thrilled with who we have on our program today. I want to waste no time and get into introducing them. We have Syed Shonar and Zvi Smith. These are two remarkable young men who are both Princeton students. Syed is a sophomore, Zvi is a freshman, and they both come from very different perspectives on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but they are two individuals who are committed to being with the other person in a respectful, generous, kind manner, while disagreeing on some fundamental things. So I wanted just to have a chance to speak with you on air on the Inner Core. And first of all, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And why don't we just start by you introducing yourselves a little bit about like what year you are, where you're from, and like what you're studying at Princeton, because of course that's very important, but then also a little bit about your history and where you're coming from, some of your experiences which have helped you or informed your opinions on this very difficult issue that the entire world really is spending a lot of time trying to work on. So, Syed, why don't you start?
Yes. So my name is Syed Shonar, and I'm a sophomore at Princeton. I'm studying chemical engineering and thinking to minor in Near Eastern Studies and maybe the Woodrow Wilson School. I come from Palestine. I live in the West Bank. My family is in Ramallah City. I was born in Jordan, in Amman, the capital of Jordan, and after the peace process, we moved to Ramallah City, where my parents had their jobs, and practically I lived the second half of school, middle school and high school, I spent in Palestine, in Ramallah City, and then I finished my high school in the U.S. in an international high school, and then came to Princeton.
Why don't we'll stop there, and then
Sure.
and you can do a kind of a brief introduction.
Sure.
And we can get more.
I'm Zvi Smith. I'm a freshman at Princeton. I grew up in Los Angeles, actually, in Westwood, and I've been, I'm studying politics and philosophy at Princeton, and also thinking about the Woodrow Wilson School, and yeah, that's basically where I am.
Now you spent a couple years in Israel, and you would call yourself an Orthodox Jew.
Yes.
So why don't you talk a little bit about the experience that you had in Israel, and also a little bit about what it means to be an Orthodox Jew, for those people who don't know maybe the difference between Reform and Conservative and Orthodox.
Sure. So I guess we'll just start with the religious aspects first. Orthodoxy maintains the traditions that we believe came from Mount Sinai, that God gave to Moses. We're people called observant Jews, traditional Jews, Orthodox Jews. We keep the laws of the Torah and within the oral tradition, including laws pertaining to Shabbat, to the Sabbath, to kosher, to different aspects of life, to really many aspects of life, in what we feel is a traditional and authentic way. Different Jews have sort of different opinions about how that works, and the past few centuries have been an interesting experiment with modernity and how Judaism has faced that and reacted to it. So that's sort of just a brief introduction to Orthodox Judaism. One of the things that's been going on in the Orthodox Jewish community, as well as in other movements of Judaism, is that after high school, many students go to Israel and study at what are called yeshivot, which are institutes of higher Jewish learning. They study the oral tradition, which is now actually written down in the Talmud, people have heard of. We study the Bible, we study Jewish thought. It's a very broad and free-flowing range of topics and ideas, which are learned often with student pairs, with rabbis who can give their own ideas, and it's it's very much a development of ideas and really free-flowing, and that's a wonderful. So it's wonderful institution.
So you spent 2 years there. Did you come straight to Princeton from the
From
yeshiva?
Oh, yeah. So I spent 2 years. I spent 2 years in Israel studying in a place called Gush Etzion, which is called the Etzion block, which is about 20 kilometers south of Jerusalem. And yeah, I spent 2 years there.
And so what was your feeling there when you were, you know, of course it's impossible to escape the Israeli-Palestinian conflict when you're in Israel, especially. So what were some of the things, the ideas you came to Israel with? How did they evolve while you were there, and did they change at all?
So it's interesting. Actually, the truth is, I sort of almost feel that once you're there, it's kind of easy to get lost, to forget about it. You're so busy living your life, you're so busy just doing what you normally do. You're not seeing it as an outsider, you're not seeing it from the media of America and from outside eyes, you're just living your life, you know. And if, you know, we have, for example, I mean, we have like bomb drills in yeshiva just in case something happens, but it's just, people take it in stride. It's one thing happens once and then you move on and go back to life. Just, you know, as with Palestinians, something goes wrong and then you move on. You just have to live. You can't get caught up. One of the things that I think was really useful for me in developing just how I think about Israel was just really being there and meeting people and meeting Israelis and meeting Palestinians and meeting people who live there and live their lives there.
Did you have an opportunity to meet Palestinians?
Very little, unfortunately, but I did have a few. I had choice interactions with with people that I met on the street, with people that I met in rides to different places. It was, you know, very limited, and unfortunately I could only speak to them in Hebrew. So right now I'm actually taking Arabic because I think that's a much better way to converse people. You can talk to people in their own language. It's hard to speak Hebrew with, you know, people who don't have their first language, or not my first language either. So that was sort of, it was really helpful to sort of, I guess it made it almost easier to feel human within a political context, that it wasn't just this issue that is happening that you are, you know, thinking about and struggling and fighting for, but something that becomes very close to your heart, and that you see more grays, and that you're able to see that there are people there, and it's not just an issue.
Did you feel that you came back with more grays than you left with?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's interesting. But you are still a member of the pro-Israel group at Princeton.
I'm the president of PIVAC,
Do you find, and I want to get to you in a moment, but do you find that there's a lot of different shades within that organization about how to approach Israel?
100%, yeah.
A lot of different opinions.
And that's one, it's one of the things that I've actually really love about the organization, is that we really, I think we try to develop people's own ideas, and people have different things that they love. So, for example, one girl in the group is more interested in the political side of things, so she's getting involved in that. Another person is interested more in the cultural side of things, so they're doing that. And they're different. People have different takes about, you know, what do you do with this piece of land and that piece of land, and how do you approach this political issue and that issue, and people really have different ideas. And I think as an organization, we try to make sure that those ideas get heard and that they get expressed. So, for example, one of the things that we're doing is having different board members running their own programs. Because instead of being, you know, my program that I'm running, you know, where it's just my ideas, we can have other people running their programs and have their ideas, and they can feel that they're getting expressed. And it just creates a much more dynamic community and helps flesh it out. Because if you only have one opinion, if it's just, you know, my opinion and Syed's opinion, so then, like, well, that's only our opinions, and that doesn't, you know, it can make the issue black and white, and can make things unhelpful.
Yeah. Well, they say with two Jews, there's three opinions. So, I mean, I think it's important to realize that both within the Palestinian side and the Israeli side, there's not one opinion. Do you find that true as well? And that you're also involved in the Palestinian organization at Princeton. And do you find that you have internal questions that come up, or is there pretty much of a unified approach?
Yeah, so what I think of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's a very long-term conflict that has lasted and dragged for a long, long time. And obviously within this long period, many, many different ideas and perspectives will evolve within each side of the conflict. So the length of the conflict will play a very strong role in making the humanitarian issues more important. So people will focus more on living, as Zvi just said, living their lives. And the conflict is, of course, part of our life, but it's every day. It's here every day. So I'm not going to give it a lot of time today, because I'm going to go to class now and study and then have lunch. And maybe at 4 p.m. I'll watch the news and I'll have this little chat with my family about Sharon's health and the elections. And then when the guests come, we see their ideas also and share and see how people could be very, very extreme and radical in their opposition to Israeli policies, and then some of them will try to soften and try to say, come on, we want to live our lives, let's try to have some cooperation, so we build, so we be constructive. So of course the different perspectives are always present, and especially when the conflict drags for 60 years.
Yes.
It becomes something that's characteristic of the conflict, that many people will just get bored of it and detach themselves totally and immigrate and leave and alienate themselves, and many people would get more passionate about the conflict. Yep.
And now you two, how did you meet? You came to Princeton this year, and at some point you came in contact with this Palestinian. And I don't know, if this was your experience. It must not have been, because you've been over to Israel several times. But my guess is there are American Jews who have never met a Palestinian. I'm pretty sure that's true. I think that's, there's like this them.
And there are many Palestinians that haven't met an Israeli or a Jewish person.
Yeah, so and all of a sudden, what was your initial meeting like? Did you say, oh, I mean, how did it go?
I actually do remember. So Sai was actually talking to a friend of mine, Netta Levanon.
Oh, Netta, yeah.
So they were speaking, we actually live in the same dorm.
Okay.
I live on the second floor, he lives on the first floor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he was speaking to Netta, and I remember I just said hi, and we started talking, and...
Did you immediately know he's Palestinian?
No, I guessed.
Okay. Because sometimes, like when I was in Israel and West Bank, I could not discern who is Arab and who is Israeli, because my eye doesn't allow. But I think
we can. Can you tell? I can tell.
I could tell.
I can tell.
Because
we can tell the difference. Yeah. But I said, oh, what's your name? He said Said.
Netta, I wouldn't tell. For instance.
No, she'd be harder to tell.
Yes, you'd be hard to tell some.
Some people you can't.
Yeah, some people are very close.
Yeah, it's people get really good at telling the difference there. It's I think one of the consequences of being in conflict is that people get really good at identifying people.
Yes, interesting.
But so Sai, I said, oh, hi, I'm Said. He said Said. So we had actually learned a similar word. I'm taking Arabic, so we had learned a word that means happy in Arabic. And I said, oh, does that mean happy? He said, no, but you're close. And so that's sort of how it started. And I said, oh, I'm taking Arabic. He said, oh, if you need any help, I'm happy to help you out.
Wow.
And that was sort of that.
Yep.
But did you know that you were, on the pro-Palestinian, pro-Israeli side? I mean, did that come up?
No, actually it was early in the year.
It was like second week or something.
Yeah, and it was very casual, yeah. And, but that didn't... so Netta is a very conservative person, as in American politics.
Really?
She's very she's conservative, and she's in the International Relations Council. This is where I met her mainly, and she lived in my dorm also. So she was roommate with my classmate from high school. So I always spoke to Netta, and we were good friends. And although we disagreed on certain things, but still it didn't, because we had a shared conflict, a common thing. We always talked about it in the dining hall. And ever since I came to Princeton, I've not met many American Jews, for instance. I met many Israelis before, but being friends with Netta opened the gate, and I thought that, having meals in the CJL, also in the Center for Jewish Life, and talking to other people, I thought that it's a very healthy thing to do. And as Tzvi happened to live in my dorm also, I thought that would be a great opportunity to exchange ideas and to get to discover more about the other side.
So you are both, I'm happy to say, members of the Religious Life Council, which I work with. And I'm curious, how much do you think the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has to do with religion, and how much has to do with politics, and how do you distinguish between the two of those? Is it primarily a religious conflict?
I don't know. We can start from I don't know the Palestinian side well enough to say whether, I mean, I would say people certainly have their views, but I think, why don't you start?
Well, yeah, what I would say about this conflict, it's one of the most complicated, I would say, in the history of humanity. The conflict was given the features of a religious conflict, just like the Crusades were given the name of the symbol of Christianity and came to the Near East with these values. But I do not believe that the objectives of Crusaders were purely religious. I understand that there were many factors that pushed these campaigns into the Near East. About the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in many cases it is given the religious characteristic, but I do not see a clash between Judaism and Christianity, as in the Arab Christianity, or Judaism and Islam. So I am reluctant to say it's purely religious. Of course, religion is a strong factor, but I give a lot of credit to the European politics of the late 17th, 18th centuries, and a lot of the role was played by the colonial powers within the conflict. So I don't give it I don't give credit to the religion only. Generating
Svi, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, again, complicated. But I would say definitely from the Israeli side, I would say it's definitely not motivated religiously. I think there are definitely religious complications. So for example, when you have an issue of like Hebron, right? So there's a lot of religious tension there because it's an ancient site, or Jerusalem, you know, the Temple Mount, where it's something, or having the Western Wall. Like those are places, those are hot spots religiously because they have so much religious significance, because they have so much history behind them and so much national and religious attachment, that those things can really come out more strongly there. But in general, I would say it's hard. When you look at the political divisions in Israel, there are some that divide up religiously, but if you look at, let's say, like Likud versus Labor, or now, which seems to be coming out, Kadima, this party that Sharon just started to build, the lines aren't religious. The lines are political. You have people who are like centrist Orthodox and farther right-wing Orthodox, and secular, and all the way left, all the way right, all the way, but more or less, who are really have a common belief about certain political issues. So there's that. But I would say that there can be religious aspects, but I'm sure people would definitely say, though, that within, you can really say, but within Palestinian society, there definitely are very religiously motivated political opinions.
Yes, of course. There are many religious groups. The people that led the first Palestinian political movement, the very early starts of the political movement in Palestine in the beginning of the century, were religious leaders just because religious leaders had authority and were given control by the British. But the second half of the 20th century had a new Palestinian political movement established by the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO. And this was largely a secular, less religious movement that focused on the Palestinian identity, nationalizing the conflict, making it national. I see Palestinians more careful about, more concerned in establishing their national identity than fighting for their own religion. And they say that if the Islamic world thinks that these places are holy and they have certain attachment to the holy sites in the Holy Land, then it's not our job as Palestinians to claim them. They have their own role. But Palestinians mainly, there are extremists or right-wing, let's say, in the Palestinian society right now, but most of the people focus on the Palestinian identity, which the conflict maybe covered or in certain cases erased. So they're trying to restore it, and they've been trying to restore it.
Just to push back a little bit, with both with the settler movement to reclaim land that they believe was biblically mandated to the Jewish people, and with Hamas, it does seem like there's at least a religious overlay, if not an actual religious impulse. I mean, can you?
I actually wouldn't make. I don't think I would make that clear line. Meaning again, in Israeli politics, it doesn't really, in that regard especially, it doesn't break down religiously. So, meaning having settlements, there can be secular, completely secular. 100%, yeah, 100%, in the same areas, and a mix. There's within Israeli politics, there's a movement of very religiously motivated people who want to reclaim land that their forefathers lived on. But in many regards, it's a matter of space, it's a matter of supplies, it's a matter of security, where issues come up which don't really matter what your religious beliefs are. So that's not really I don't think it's
in the Palestinian society there are religious organizations, religious institutions, that's true, but again, Hamas, for instance, claiming the whole of historic Palestine represented in Galilee, for instance. Galilee has no immediate attachment to Islam, for instance.
I see.
So their way is Islamic, but their claim is national. So their national ties to the land in the north, in the south. The center is Jerusalem and its surroundings. Bethlehem is of no immediate interest to Islam. And for the Muslims around the world, believing in Judaism and Christianity is an essential thing. So any holy site that belongs to the Jews and the Christians should be respected and considered holy. So it wouldn't be realistic that the Muslims, go and claim the Vatican, for instance. But yes, there are people who use religion as their way, but not necessarily to claim rights.
Right. How do you think, like, being together on the Religious Life Council, being at the same dorm at Princeton, being, helping him with his Arabic, I'm sure there'll be a quid pro quo at some point.
You have language exchanges.
How do you think that's going to affect you into the future? I mean, can you put yourself forward in 10 years, 20 years when, as many Princeton graduates, you go on to a leadership role in wherever you are. How do you think this will affect the way it seems like you both have very deep beliefs, and which are not completely the same. Let's be frank. But how has it been to meet someone of a different religion and a different political persuasion, and yet still be able to be kind to one another?
I feel very fortunate that Princeton gave us the opportunity to have very open-minded, intelligent people with whom we would have very, very good conversations. Meeting Tzvi, I have established a faith that dialogue with the other side of the conflict is a possibility, and it's something that's a necessity in the Middle East conflict, and that could be established and could continue to resolve the conflict eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I've felt very fortunate to meet Said. It's just, first of all, he's a great guy and just a wonderful person to spend time with. And there are very few people that you can sit down and speak to for like 8 hours at a time and just enjoy speaking with them about things that you fundamentally disagree on. And just for me, I guess, I think we both want to go back in a few years. And it's just going to be, I just really look forward to having someone who I can keep speaking to and keep learning from and keep sharing my ideas with, and to keep having that just an open door, just being able to keep seeing another person's perspective, which is very hard to see when you can get very tense and very defensive. And it's just so good for me to have someone like Said, especially, and Said personally, just to have that gate. So it's been really great.
A gate is a great word. I mean, it's really an entree into the other the other world. Not that you're going to step through it and become a part of the other world, but necessarily that you can see it. And I think that the more entryways that we can create between the two sides on this conflict, but also many conflicts. So I just want to say how much I appreciate both of you, and I want to also say that stay strong, because it's hard when you go back. Being a part of any group. Once you're in that group and away from the other people, it's very hard to remember.
We've talked exactly about this issue.
Yes.
Oh, you've talked about this.
Yeah.
So did you? Because I could predict both of you being in the West Bank and you being in Israel, and not really seeing a way. And so what did you resolve?
Private conversation.
Yes.
That was it. We decided. We were just talking about how when you speak privately, you can be so much more open and so much more gray about things. You can allow for things to not be so clear and say, look, I don't know. I don't know about this issue. I don't know about that issue. I'm not so sure. But then we realize that, like, when you walk out that door and it's the whole world again, you sort of get sucked up by your group, by your sort of group identity, and that you sort of toe a party line because, that's what the group's doing, And just having a friendship is what's really necessary, because it allows us to not war and trust, because then, I can express some doubts about things I've been thinking about, and Sai can express doubts about things he's been thinking about, and that just really helps us think through together and piece things together.
Also trying to raise awareness within the community that there are people on the other side that we can approach, and having that element present in the community is very healthy.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very
both
much.
of you,
Thank you.
Svi Smith and Said Shonar, for being here today on the Inner Core. We'll be back in just a moment for a final wrap-up. Thank you for being with us here on the Inner Core. I just want to end with a few words. I think that Svi and Said said it very well. Like, have a conversation, maintain an open gate, maintain friendships. We all, in this world right now, there's a great tendency to move to one side or the other and be in conflict. And I think the most important thing we can remember right now is, how can we connect? Religion can be a divisive tool, but it can also be one that allows for dialogue, allows for conversation. So I encourage you to go out there and find someone with whom you really disagree, and see if you can somehow create a personal relationship with someone who you disagree with, and see, take them out for coffee and say, I just want to hear your point of view because I don't understand it, and let me tell you mine. And from there, maybe there'll be some softening and a possibility to move forward together. So for this week on the Inner Core, this has been a great show. Thank you for joining us. My name is Paul Rauschenbusch, Associate Dean of Religious Life at Princeton University. Until next time, take care.